Welcome to Cardinals Cover 2 with Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Cardinals Cover 2 is brought to you by Arizona Cardinals Podcasts. Visit azcardinals.com/podcasts. From the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, here's Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki.
2 weeks from today, we are taking the show on the road, and I know, MJ, you are looking very, very much forward to the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. First time ever taking Cards Cover 2 on the road outside of training camp.
Yeah, my first Combine would have been when Steve Schoenfeld, who passed away in a car accident, unfortunately, one of my mentors. So I was doing the midday show, I think, with Bickley from 1 to 3. And I think it's an hour or 2 hours ahead of us. And so I'm doing the show right by the window or the patio door. And I see Bob Ferguson out there walking, and he's in shorts, and it's like 35 degrees. And let's just say he didn't do the Bud Adams, but he did flip me the bird. And said, get to work. But anyways, Craig, first time for you. It's,
Absolutely.
It's the
Looking forward to
NFL
it.
Mecca. I mean, you talk about all owners there. You talk about head coaches and GMs and position coaches and agents and an NFL personnel. I think you're going to enjoy it. It's a really good networking, and obviously we're going there to work. And we're going to be looking at, obviously, some of the quarterbacks, but other positions, wide receivers, and any local guys, and then offensive linemen, linebackers, possibly a corner to fill your need. But I'm looking forward to it, and I think you will too.
We'll have shows Wednesday and Friday. You're never going to let that one go, are you? We'll take that all the way up until April 25th when the draft happens.
The Arizona Cardinals are on the clock, and they're going to take Greedy Williams.
No! Number one. I didn't say number one. Don't put words in my mouth.
Top 10, you said.
I said top 10.
That's not happening.
Okay, we'll see.
Okay.
All right, let's take off on this Wednesday here as we broadcast from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center. What's ahead on the show today? The mini coaching ties, the defensive coordinator Vance Joseph. It's quite impressive and, more importantly, a huge advantage, at least in my opinion. You'll hear from Sean Kugler, his first comments since becoming an offensive line coach. Bonus material. Everyone loves bonus material. We've got bonus material from episode 1 of Cardinals Flight Plan. And, of course, your questions via social media using the hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2 with the number 2 to get involved in the show. We'll do that a little bit later on here this afternoon. But first, the news of the day, and I believe, probably not, but I think we can put to bed the Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray, number 1 overall draft pick discussion to bed. Or can we? Probably not. Yesterday, though, head coach Kliff Kingsbury tried to quiet the talk.
Our feelings towards Josh haven't waned or changed or anything. I get we have the first pick, and so there's going to be a million scenarios over the next 3 months they're going to come up. But no, Josh is our guy, and Kyler's a tremendous player, and I said that was being very complimentary before we played an opponent. And I understand the soundbite, but like I said, there'll be a ton of scenarios that come up before we get to the draft.
Yeah, that soundbite that he's referring to is something that we actually discussed here on the show, and it goes back to when Kingsbury was the head coach at Texas Tech and getting ready, and this is the key part that everyone seems to miss. It was in mid-October, getting ready to play Oklahoma. So what does a head coach do when you're getting ready to play an opponent? Well, you talk up that opponent, and that's what he did with Kyler Murray. Talked him up, said he would take him if had the choice or chance to draft Murray with the number 1 overall pick. Of course, that was October. He gets hired in January as the Cardinals head coach, and now we're sitting here in February, March, and into April, and the Cardinals have that number 1 overall draft pick. Some believe what Kingsbury said yesterday, MD, some don't. Again, this much we do know. We've got 10 weeks to go before the draft at the end of April, and this story is not going to go away.
Listen, we've done enough conference calls over the years. Anytime you get a coach on, usually it's a Wednesday, and, they pour the sugar on about the certain player, and a lot of coaches can name the entire, defensive
Bill Belichick
stars.
did that, I remember, right on a conference call. Went down the entire roster.
Right. It really prevents us from asking other questions. Now, there are follow-up questions or rebuttal a little bit, but for the most part, it happens everywhere. You talk up your opponent, and obviously he was a really good college player, so the good news here is obviously the scouts and the coaches will have input. They definitely want to address what the players' strengths are and how do they fit in the certain schemes on offense and defense. But ultimately, Steve Keim is making the picks. So whether Kingsbury liked him at the time, which he did, Steve Keim input, and they'll have their 120 board set so that there's going to be no second guessing when they're on the clock and which direction they're going to go. And if they want to trade down, they'll have options there. But for the most part, all that work is done before draft day. So they'll stick to their board, and we'll see how active they are when it comes to making trades or at least trying to move up or down in a certain round.
People are trying to connect dots, which is what you do when you have all this leeway going into an event, which the draft is. And, yeah, Kingsbury now Cardinals head coach. They have the number 1 overall pick. Murray announces he's going to play football. He hires Kingsbury's agent to represent him. People put 1 + 1 + 1, and all of a sudden, hey, Cardinals are going to draft Murray and go away from Josh Rosen. But let's remember that during the coaching search, as we've seen on Cardinals flight plan, the specific plan for the Cardinals coaching search was 1, find an offensive guy. 2, find an offensive guy who could work with and develop Josh Rosen. Now, all of a sudden, in the last week and a half, you're going to deviate from that? I don't think so.
No, but again, it's good fodder. And,
absolutely.
You know, we're in lion season right now. I mean, I wouldn't believe a whole lot of things that you hear. And you get to the combine, you hear more, and then you start connecting the dots a little bit. But there's no dots to be connected. I mean, I don't think if you had a true sermon, if we polled Kingsbury when he made that comment, A, probably didn't think whatever he was going to be doing was going to have the first pick in the draft.
Well, didn't expect to be fired from Texas
B,
Tech.
He wasn't expected to get fired, and he worked for USC for 6 weeks. So it just worked out that way, and obviously it was intriguing to him to come here because of Josh Rosen.
And again, this is a benefit, I think, for the Cardinals, though, because the more people that talk it up, the more maybe a team that is looking to move up and really likes Murray will jump ahead and think, hey, let's call the Cardinals. We want to make Murray the number 1 pick. We want to give him that honor, and let's see if the Cardinals are willing to trade down.
You know, I was talking to Billy Davis just, and not only about Nick Bosa, even though he coached the linebackers, but obviously he was on that staff, is how does he evaluate a guy like Dwayne Haskins? And he said this guy can throw it. Now, he's only got a small sample, probably a little bit similar to Kyle Murray. So in that standpoint, and maybe even Mitch Trubisky, they only have X amount of starts, where a guy like Drew Lock and Daniel Jones from Duke, they got over 30 starts. And according to Bill Parcells, you want to draft a captain, a leader, and a guy that's had at least enough starts in college football just so he can adapt to the NFL. But Haskins and Murray clearly are the number 1 and 2, and Denver just made a trade for Joe Flacco, and that won't kick in until the league season starts. So everyone was thinking Drew Lock there at number 10. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping these guys go and put on a show because that means their stock is rising. Absolutely, and we'll see if the Cardinals do something with that number 1 overall pick or decide to stay there. The one aspect of this storyline that is not getting talked a lot about is the effect it might have, or if it has any effect, on Josh Rosen. And do the Cardinals need to speak to Rosen, or have they spoken to Rosen because of all this speculation? Well, team president Michael Bidwell this week on 98.7 FM, Arizona sports station, was asked just that.
Look, Josh is a smart guy. He's been around. He's seen what happens year in and year out. There's always a lot of speculation that turns out to not be true. But as we get moving forward, we're going to continue to build on this team and build around the foundation that we have. And we've got a great foundation in place, and we'll continue to do that.
Now, let's be clear. The Cardinals do not need or are required or feel like they have an obligation to let players know what their plans are in the offseason, even if it affects said player. Now, there are certain players that, and this applies to any team, as you get up in years and stature, like a Larry Fitzgerald or a Patrick Peterson, that maybe they ask for your input, but those players aren't making decisions. I'll say this, though, if the Cardinals didn't reach out to Rosen or his agent or wherever, putting myself in Rosen's shoes as, the employer-employee relationship, I certainly would love to know where I stood given all the talk, because this happens in the business world, everyday life. There's an ownership change, a management change, and all of a sudden everyone underneath is going, well, what does this mean for me? It's fair to ask that question. Now, whether Rosen has or the Cardinals have reciprocated with a phone call to him, I don't know. But, and again, they don't have to. But if I'm Rosen, I certainly would love to know.
I got to think he's in the loop. Now, he's been traveling. He's been going back to school, and I anticipate he'll be here for the first phase of the off-season workout. So I assume he's in the loop. And, yeah, does he need to be reassured? Well, he's the starting quarterback, and I think they've made that clear between ownership, GM, and head coach within the last 48 hours.
Yeah, Josh is our guy. 4 words uttered from Kliff Kingsbury's mouth earlier this week. And, of course, the draft coming up on April 25th. With regards to that number 1 overall pick, according to the general manager, Steve Keim, no decision has been made yet on whom they might select.
I mean, I can say this truthfully. I truly don't know who we're going to take, and because
that was it right
no,
there.
because again, we have not been through the process, which is to meet with our scouts and our coaches. I haven't met one college football player yet personally. So that is a huge part of this process. Again, as I said earlier, to get to know the person, to understand what makes them tick, to understand how passionate they are about the game, to see how they'll fit, again, in our culture. So it's way too early to even consider who is going to be the number 1 pick. But it's a lot of fun for our league, and it's certainly fun for all of us to talk about. But, you know, when I go through the evaluation process heading into the draft, I will look at every player like we have nobody on our roster. I'll evaluate everybody the same.
Again, that was Keim this morning on 98.7 FM, Arizona's sports station with Doug and Wolf.
Yes, and, you know, when you look at it, again, they're going to have their 120 board, but we don't have medical. We don't have character. We haven't talked to the position coach. We haven't talked to the SID, you know, and the strength coaches. This guy.
I'll go a step further. What Keim just said, he hasn't spoken to any college player,
right.
And that means more than anything as far as making that decision.
Player
versus
if
you get
person.
in front of that player and don't like the vibe, body language, or what they're saying, or believe what they're saying, then you have to make a quick decision, an important decision as far as, okay, what you showed me on the field, are you just doing that to get your foot in the door, and are you going to continue to work hard to maintain yourself at the NFL level? But that one-on-one meeting or that group setting, the interviews at the Combine, or whether here at the facility or elsewhere, pro days, some of that means more to a lot of general managers, decision makers, than the actual measurables and how they tested running the 3-cone or a 40-yard dash.
Interesting. Oklahoma's pro day is on March 13th. Free agency starts March 11th. You can start making announcements on the 13th. So I'm curious to see, because you are going to get a 15-minute interview with him at the Combine if you put a request in. Each team's allowed 60 players. And then you can talk to him at his pro day. And then you'll be curious to see how many scouts are there and GMs and guys that obviously want to take them out to dinner. And then you could bring them in for a visit. You're allowed 30 of those. So, you know, when it comes to Bosa, his father was a former second-round pick in 1972 by the Dolphins, only played 2 years. His brother, Joey Bosa, he's been on the shelf a little bit. He did return in a small role against the Cardinals. He's got a bright future. The hernia operation was done by Dr. Myers. He's a renowned specialist in Philadelphia. He's the guy. It's really called a core muscle now. So you got to get all that information. And if the team doctor here, Tom Reed, or the main, he's more the guy, daily guy, but they have other guys in there. If somebody puts a red mark next to his name, that basically means you can't draft the player, and that's not owner getting involved, the GM, the head coach, or a coach standing on the table saying you got to take this guy. If he's got a little red flag next to his name, he's not on their board. He won't be on the 120 board. Now, you want to bring him in as an undrafted free agent? That's completely different.
Yeah, and all that stuff hasn't even happened yet with regard to the draft.
The Cardinals
process.
are finishing up they have over 300 free agent grades. And so they're wrapping that up because now they brought in new coaches and they want to get their thoughts on what some of these players, maybe they've had relationships with them, maybe they've played for them in the past. So they're finishing up, but they want input from the coaching staff. And then you cross-check it with the scouts, and then you cross-check it with the general manager. So nothing's going to get lost in the shuffle here. Either you put a grade on them, and somebody else puts a grade on them, and then they have an overall grade. So that's part of the process going forward.
The one thing that's clear listening to Keim and Bidwell this week, the Cardinals are doing everything in their power to put 2018 behind them.
2018 is in the rearview mirror. I certainly apologize that we have not lived up to the standards and the expectations that our fans have and that our organization has. We are fully committed as an organization to get this thing headed back in the right direction, and we will not sleep until we get this thing right.
we are going to be aggressive and bold. There's no question about that. We're going to continue to keep our foot on the gas and lean over our ski tips here as we go through the offseason. We've got a great position. We're going to flip this thing fast. I'm very confident in the decisions we're making. And, I can't wait to see it all play out, on the field this fall.
Does 3-13 make you more aggressive, or do you feel like this is who you've been the whole time and one bad year is not going to change that?
We've always been aggressive. You look back at the things that we've done, both on the field and off the field. We've broken the mold a number of different times, whether it's with the stadium design, whether it's with all or nothing, whether it's with, decisions we've made about football. So for me, what we're going to continue to do is be aggressive. But I can tell you 3-13 is certainly a great motivator. Epic failure like last year was certainly and is certainly remains a great motivator for me to get this turned around fast and to keep as much pressure internally on the people that are making decisions to continue to push things forward. And I can tell you across the board, every woman and man in our organization is working hard, whether it's on the football side or the business side, to make sure we get this flipped quickly.
That includes you and I, MJ, as well.
Yeah, they were aggressive in 2018.
Didn't work, though, with us.
You're saying we're the jinx?
Put it this way, it's crossed my mind a time or two.
Well,
don't tell anyone.
Well, I could say this just from afar in talking to people. Keim is motivated. He takes this personal. He'd be the first to admit he's got to do a better job. Obviously, ID and draft picks, free agents. And they are going to be aggressive because they can be. They got cap space. They have options with every pick in the first round. They have free agency. So they are going to be aggressive. But I know that Keim is motivated to get back to the team that won 10, 11, and 13 games. Not that he was part of everything from the 7-8-1, the 8-8, and the 3-13. That's on his resume. You cannot escape that. You can't erase that. But he wants to get back, and I could tell from talking to people that know him and talk to him daily, he is motivated. And from an organization standpoint, they couldn't be thrilled about that. Even more. But also at the same time, though, this team should be aggressive based on what happened last year.
A couple other notes since our last show here on Cards Cover 2. The Cardinals did add 2 more coaches to Kingsbury's staff, Rusty McKinney and Don Shumpert. McKinney is a defensive assistant. He spent the past 3 seasons with the Dolphins. Shumpert is joining the Cardinals as a participant in the Bill Bidwell Coaching Fellowship, and this is something that was established back in 2015 as a way to increase diversity and provide more opportunities to gain coaching experience. A couple of other past fellowship participants, LeVon Kirkland and Terry Allen. And Shumpert does have NFL experience. Last season with the Giants, he was an offensive assistant. So now you add those 2, and Kingsbury's coaching staff is a total of 22. Adding Kingsbury, and you've got a coaching staff of 23 for the 2019 NFL season. As we come to you here on this Wednesday afternoon, broadcasting from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, and of course doing so in our Bose QC35s. Go to Bose.com for more information. Programming note, this is our last show of the week. We will rejoin you next Wednesday after the President's Day holiday weekend, and of course in 2 weeks we'll be broadcasting from the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. More on the coaching staff. This week, the Cardinals held media availability with all of the assistants. It was broken down into 2 days, defensive and special teams 1 day, offense the next day. We're going to focus here on this show on the defensive assistants. And Kingsbury, when he addressed the media and introduced his assistants, he made it very, very clear. Vance Joseph is in charge of the defense.
What an incredible defensive mind to have a guy who's been a head coach in this league, and for me to lean on him for advice and thoughts and logistics will be huge moving forward. He's put together a great staff, really let him and wanted him to bring in guys that he was comfortable with and had a prior relationship with as far as installing his defense and coaching the style of play that he wants coached.
It is not with direct words in which Kingsbury said, yes, Vance Joseph is the head coach of the defense, but you did get a sense, MJ, from just listening to Kingsbury and listening to the other coaches as well. There is going to be a partnership. Kingsbury is going to offer his input, but for the most part, Joseph, as we heard Kingsbury said, was given the freedom to go out and hire whom he wanted, that he was comfortable with, that he has a history with, and more on that in a moment. But as far as defense, that is Vance Joseph. Offense is going to be Kliff Kingsbury.
And that's the way it should be. Now, last year I thought that you're Steve Wilkes, your first-time head coach, and now, granted, he's been in the NFL as a coordinator and position coach, but I thought you want to have one voice. And I think once it's clear that there's one voice in there, and that's Kliff Kingsbury, but on the defensive side of the ball, why wouldn't you tap into his knowledge? Former head coach, former defensive coordinator. Obviously, he's been around, so he's got a lot of connections, and so you lean on him when it comes to hires. And then Jeff Rodgers. I mean, to me, he's got enough skins on the wall throughout his career and what he did last year. Now, the coverage units need to get better. He'd be the first to admit that. So, yeah, you want one voice, but when it comes to defense and special teams, those guys have just as much credentials, if not more, because they've been at this level longer than Kingsbury.
And that input from Kingsbury, at least on the defensive side, where Kingsbury thinks offenses might be able to attack,
yes,
or where vice versa, the offenses might be vulnerable given what Vance Joseph wants to do. So there'll be a working relationship. It's not like it's going to be completely ignored.
Yeah, because if they hired like Rex Ryan or Rob Ryan, and back in the day, the late Buddy Ryan, you would have the offense and defense fighting like in week 2 of the preseason.
You ready to play a little game?
I am.
All right. It's called 6 Degrees of Separation. You familiar with this game?
I am familiar with this.
Idea that all people are 6 or fewer social connections away from each other. It's kind of more familiar 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Well, you can play this game, and the Cardinals have, with Vance Joseph.
Well, you know, this league, there's the degrees of separation is very slim. So some guys you've already had interactions with have either known of or have met before. So, and if you haven't met them, you know somebody that has met them. So it was kind of an easy transition. But we were talking about it the other night. As now that the staff is complete and everybody's kind of gotten together, and we've actually gotten together outside of the building, we really want to make it work because we actually like each other, which is not always the case.
My connection here was to Vance Joseph, who I worked for in Miami back in 2016, and had a great experience there. We played pretty good defense in a lot of different areas in Miami, and went to the playoffs that year. Largely just on the guys being competitive and playing hard. So I'm fired up to be back with him and think he's a great coach.
I'm excited about it because I'm a firm believer that offenses score points and defenses win games. So the bottom line is, we've got to protect the paint to a certain degree, and we've got to do a great job doing it. So I think we're off to a great start. I walk in here, you got a Patrick Peterson sitting on, either your right or your left side. He can handle his business. You add a key piece in Robert Alford, and now we're able to do what we're accustomed to doing on the defensive side of the ball. So when you look at how we'll build this team, I think you'll be impressed at the end of the day.
It's attacking. It's a simple scheme where we really don't get overly complicated. I've been in this system before. VJ obviously has. Vance and I were together in San Francisco when he first came in. So, yeah, that's where our history is. So we both, everyone on the staff knows the system well. So it's not like we're bringing guys in that don't know it. Well, that's a plus also. When you add guys like Brooks Reed, who's been in the system before, and you start building it, it's a simple, attacking, aggressive system to let players run and hit, go to the ball.
Now, for those listening to the podcast here on this Wednesday, we heard from Greg Williams, cornerbacks coach, Charlie Bolin, the assistant linebackers coach, Marcus Robertson, defensive backs coach, and Bill Davis, linebackers coach. By the way, I forgot to ask Coach Davis, are we allowed to still call him Billy?
I called him Bill yesterday. So
okay, maybe we need to work our way.
Yeah,
up.
maybe when you get to training camp or something.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll throw in also what we didn't hear from, but who have history with Coach Joseph. Rob Grosso, Rusty McKinney have worked with Joseph in the past. You can throw in Jeff Rodgers. Joseph, and Davis were all together in San Francisco. And then on the offensive side, Sean Kugler was with Joseph last year in Denver. So that are 8 guys on this coaching staff between defense, special teams, and offense that all have a connection, and not a long like a way back connection, but within the last 3-4 years have worked with Joseph. So everyone, and we've all heard about, Kingsbury not familiar with a lot of these names. Well, the guys in the trenches who are going to be working with these players specifically do know one another and what the main objective and goal is, especially on defense, moving back to a 3-4.
Yeah, and you just take it for granted. You go back to Arians, and he hired a lot of his guys that either played for him at Temple or he had connections with them, and so you're going to get along. And again, they knew who the boss was. Here, I mean, the fact they got a lot of NFL experience, and Kugler, to me, after we look at the hire of Kliff Kingsbury, Vance Joseph, and Tom Clements, I think he's the next important hire because he was a wanted man. Steve put the full court press on him when he recruited him here. There's some recruiting involved because other teams were offering just as much, if not more, money, and I think he wanted to be close to UTEP where he coached, and he's got family there, so it made sense geographically. But for the most part, I mean, you heard Greg Williams, and he said, we actually went out of the facility and we all get along, and maybe that wasn't the case last year when you got Mike McCoy getting fired, and there were a couple guys on the staff that were really close to him, and then Leftwich comes in and he's got to figure it out. So it happens when you're losing. People start to point the finger. It's not my fault. It's their fault. We didn't have the right players. They didn't give us the right players. So there's always finger pointing when you're losing. But here you could see these guys, they all come from different backgrounds, but they do have relationships with other coaches, if not the head coach. And that can go a long way when it comes to personalities. And leave your ego at the door, and let's all strive for the same. Let's pull the rope in the same direction.
Yeah, one common goal. And that's to win on Sundays. I'm glad you brought up Kugler. He was the first ever guest of the Coaches Chronicle podcast with Paul Calvisi and Lisa Matthews. If you missed it, go to azcardinals.com. But some good insight on the new offensive line coach. He and his wife are foodies. They love to go out. And then Kugler was on the Boise State staff that upset Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl and had some great stories on that game. But he also discussed his connection to Mason Cole, who was teammates with Kugler's son at Michigan.
Mason was a left tackle for 3 years, a starting left tackle, and Patrick was a center. And then Patrick played center, and they moved Mason back to tackle. And, they got a great connection. And very funny story. We almost drafted Mason in Denver. We literally were going to take him in the same round. We were 2 picks behind Arizona, and we're standing in the room waiting for the pick for the card to be turned in. And they said, the Arizona Cardinals select Mason Cole. I was like, oh, well.
Well, now it's meant to be.
Yeah, it worked out.
Wow.
And, but he's a great young man and very smart, very intelligent. He's going to be a 10, 12-year player in this league, and got a lot of high hopes for him.
Guys, speaking of the 6 degrees of separation there, you heard Kugler there. Of course, he's 1 degree to Vance Joseph as well. On the offensive side, he worked with Vance in Denver a year ago. But a couple of them that came to mind in our other podcast, another podcast that we do called Out of Bounds during the regular season, Cardinals offensive lineman Justin Pugh. He had dinner with the president of Columbia. And he got to that because he knew someone that knew Mark Wahlberg. And he went down to Columbia with Mark Wahlberg and had dinner with the president of Columbia. So that's kind of interesting. And then 2015, remember when the team stayed at the Greenbrier down in White Sulphur Springs, was it West Virginia? Yeah. My room service, I called room service at the swanky Greenbrier, and they brought the food, and he was telling me, I said, who's the most famous person you've brought room service to? And he said the King of Norway. So I'm just 2 degrees away from the King of Norway. How about
royalty.
That? Exactly.
We are in the presence of royalty here on Cards Cover 2. Just 2 degrees of separation, Holmes.
The King. Oh. The King of Norway.
Wow.
Small world. Do we call you King Jr.?
King Nothing, like the Metallica song. Anyway, carry on.
Always appreciate that, but it is worth mentioning because when you have people that are working so closely together and for a number of hours during the course of the day, you need that familiarity. And with regards to Kugler and his familiarity with offensive lines, Lions, Bills, Steelers, and we talked about it when he was hired. He was sought after. He different teams wanted him on their staff, and the Cardinals were lucky enough to hire him, and he played the position at UTEP where, talking about 6 degrees of separation, Andy Reid was his position coach, and he spoke very highly of Reid and that connection. He thought Reid, if he didn't advance further up, would be considered the best offensive line coach in NFL history. He thought that highly of him, and Reed was that good of a coach. So that's kind of, when you're looking at putting staffs together, where have you been? Who have you been with? Who have you been connected with or learned from, influenced by? And all of a sudden now you put that all together and you can have, that good staff that can teach players who then can go out on the field and execute.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about coaching. It's really about teaching. I mean, putting players in position to make plays, playing to their strengths, not forcing them to do something they're not comfortable with, or, reacting versus thinking. You can play a lot faster. So those are all pluses, and I'm looking forward to him because, I go back. This is my 25th year covering the team. I thought George Warhop was a good offensive line coach, and he's still in the league. And then Russ Grimm, kind of stubborn, and he was old school, but he got that team to the Super Bowl with Mike Gandy at left tackle, Levi Brown at right tackle. I think Deuce is in there. So I want to give those guys credit, but I think this is one of the better hires probably in the last 20 years when you look at the offensive line coaches. But I do want to point out Warhop and Russ Grimm.
Yeah, there's no question Kugler is well qualified to talk about what the Cardinals need on the offensive line.
Toughness, mental toughness, physical toughness. We're looking for guys that finish blocks, that play with a little nasty demeanor. I think athleticism is a premium, but you can overcome some of those things. You can be a little bit less athletic as long as you have the mental toughness to overcome that. So we want guys that are going to compete on every play from the start of the play till the end of the play and finish. So that's the number one quality that I look for.
Love it. Physicality. I asked him today, are you going to play a power scheme or a zone scheme? He said it's all going to be based on the opponent. We're going to adapt to what their strengths are, and we're going to try to make them weaknesses. So, yeah, this is a really good hire, and I know that they had to put the full court press on him. I'm thrilled he's here, and they're going to be a better offensive line just from a physicality standpoint between the ears and winning one-on-one matchups. And this team has to run the football with David Johnson and Edmonds, and we'll see what Foster's role is and Logan's. And I do think they'll add another guy or two just for training camp. But for the most part, it all starts up front. We talked about protecting Rosen. That's going to be really on his shoulders, along with the play calling and the protection up front.
Yeah, if you can't protect, you can't open up rushing lanes.
No.
I don't care who the quarterback is, the running back, the wide receivers, you've got no chance. It always starts, and it's cliche, the game is won and lost in the trenches, but it's true.
It really, I mean, we try to simplify things because I think we overestimate because, you hear play calls, and we know that they are only going to have a handful of plays, and you can flip formations. And really, it's about X's and O's work, but it's about the Jimmies and the Joes. And the fact that this team now can hang their hat on possibly the offensive line being the strength, that will go a long way. Because now all of a sudden you're running the ball, you're running the ball down the throat of your defense. Your defense is on the sidelines, they're not on the field as much. So you want to play complementary football: teams, defense, and offense.
And knock on wood, that offensive line stays healthy.
Yeah, and in fairness to Ray Brown, I mean, he came in here, played 20 years in the league. This was his second opportunity being the first offensive line coach, the main guy. But I don't know if anyone could have succeeded in that situation. I mean, but there were some issues when it came to in-game adjustments during the week, and that's what happens when you fire a coordinator. And then you have Byron Leftwich trying to, use the edges a little bit more, get David more involved in the passing game. So, but again, he's going to have that on his shoulders, and I think he warrants that.
If you missed any of the Kugler conversation, just go to azcardinals.com. Again, it's the Coaches Chronicle podcast, airs every other Tuesday with an assistant coach, 3 p.m. on Facebook. Watch Paul Calvisi and Lisa Matthews. A great first episode. Expect another good one coming up in 2 weeks. We are broadcasting here on this Wednesday from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center and doing so in our Bose QC35s. Just go to Bose.com for more information. A reminder, this is our last show of the week. We will be back with you in 1 week's time next week following the lengthy President Day holiday weekend. Appreciate the Cardinals allowing us to have a little bit of a break. And, of course, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be in Indianapolis for the NFL Combine. No guarantee that I'll get Jurecki to leave the Combine when I do, but
we're on the same flight, I thought.
Yeah, but you're such a Combine guy. You just might stay for another couple of days.
Well, to be honest, I mean, usually the defensive backs come in on Saturday, do their interviews. We're not leaving until the evening, so we should be able to get that. And then they do their workouts on Sunday and Monday, so we're going to miss those. But everything's on TV, so I'm on the same flight with you. It's a round-trip flight, right? We're not. It's not a one-way
It's
flight.
a one-way ticket.
Where
Just
I
leave
got to
Jurecki in
hitchhike
Indy.
to the airport. So, no, I'm leaving with you, and I'm arriving with you.
All right.
We're a team here, Grialou.
Are you sure? Okay, never mind. We'll just leave it at that. We're all good here on Cards Covered 2. Before
we love our job.
Before we hear from the Bird Gang, a reminder that episode 2 of Cardinals Flight Plan drops February 21st, 6 p.m. on Facebook Watch. While we wait for that, how about some bonus material from the debut episode?
Man, I've learned so much from Larry. I remember when I came in as a rookie, I used to just watch him. It was a rough time for me my rookie year, so it kind of got to where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I should start looking at Larry. And I remember I think it was my second year. I was throwing away a stack of checks, just tossing them in the trash. And Larry's like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, what? Throwing away the checks. They're direct deposit. I don't need them. He was like, give me one of the checks. He opens it up, folds it out. He said, you see that right there? That's your full name, your address, your phone number, and your social security number. I don't need anything from you. I got everything I need right here on this paper that you just threw in the trash can that you didn't even look at. And I was just like, this is my first check stub. I never had these were my first check stubs that I got. I've never had a job. So he's like, dude, you see what you're doing right now? I was like, man, I hope nobody has it. God, I've been throwing these away for the past. I threw all my rookie checks away. I hope no one got me. But I can go on days about lessons that I learned from Larry.
Good stuff.
You never want to throw away information, vital information. We need to let DJ Humphreys know that you can buy things that are called a shredder, shredding machine.
Hopefully he's got an accountant that handles that kind of stuff.
Brandon Natus, Cardinals manager of social media, joining us here. And again, we usually wait until Friday to bring Brandon in, but because it is our last show of the week, we figured, what the heck, let's keep a tradition going. He comes in on Wednesday, and, well, MJ and I have already discussed, you're not going to get us this week. We're fine. We're solid.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how you guys have, brought it together, counseling and stuff. I know Ohms is taking you guys there, so we'll see. There might be a question planted in here to get you guys riled up.
Bring it.
All right, what's the Bird Gang sounding off on?
So we'll start with Instagram. First one, I know they brought DJ Swearinger in towards the end of last year. You have Buddha in place. Any chance that the Cardinals bring back Trey Boston? Now, obviously, that would mean that they would move on from Bethea, or Bethea would move on. Thoughts that could happen?
I think Boston was more of a Wilkes guy, and he signed the first day of training camp, and that's when Steve was serving his suspension. So I don't think he's in the mix. I think he can go out in the market and maybe get a 1 or 2 year deal. I don't know if he's going to get 6, 7, 8 million a year, which he was looking for. Antoine Bethea is 34. His cap number is a little bit high. I think he's played in the league now 12 or 13 years. Started in Indy, and then he went to San Francisco as a cap casualty there. That usually happens when you bring a new staff in. So I would think that he provides great leadership in that locker room. Maybe they ask him to take a little bit of pay cut, but I can't speak for him. So on paper, Buddha Baker and Swearinger will be the starting safeties. They got to find a slot corner. That usually is a veteran guy. It costs you maybe $5 or $6 million. So but Boston, to me, is on the outside looking in.
And I think Boston wants to get paid. Whether he does, who knows. And with regard to Bethea, I'll say this. The man produces over 100 tackles this season. So veteran leadership is huge, and I think you need that. Sometimes it doesn't always factor in decisions. We go back to Gerard Powers. Rashad Johnson. Like guys that maybe not flash, but are key glue guys in a locker room, and that needs to be something that is considered this offseason.
Speaking of the glue, we'll talk about the center position, glue to the offensive line. How do you think Mason Cole performed this year? I know Coach Kugler kind of talked about that yesterday on the Coaches podcast. And what free agents could you see them targeting for the offensive line?
Well, they don't need to look for another center. They've got two with Cole and A.Q. Shipley. But considering that I don't think the Cardinals planned for Cole to play this season at all, and he was thrown in the midst of training camp, never missed a snap. He needs to get stronger. He knows that. But I thought he played solid this season as a rookie. That's not an easy transition to go from college to pro, especially at the offensive line, because we've seen offensive linemen struggle in their first year.
Yeah, I mean, Pro Football Focus sent out the centers in the NFC West. Now, they all had a 50 grade. He was at the bottom, but it was very close. So you're talking about veteran guys. He's one guy on offense that played over 1,000 snaps. I would say right now, depending on what happens with Shipley, we know he can play guard, but I talked to Sean Kugler today about position flexibility. That's how you keep yourself in the league. I think John Wetzel and Earl Watford are prime examples of that. So I think left guard is open for competition, and then I think right tackle. It doesn't appear that Joe Barksdale's on the radar, and I think that's based on the new coaching staff coming in saying he doesn't fit. So left guard and right tackle, and we'll get into some of the names as we get closer to free agency.
So you would say, though, that Mason has the inside
yes.
at center.
And the fact that his son played at Michigan with Mason, so,
Talking about Sean Kugler.
Sean Kugler, yeah. So there's a relationship there. Going back to his high school days, he started, 104 games going into the last year. Now it's 120 or 121. So, yeah, I mean, they feel like they checked that box. And I like what Kugler said. He thinks he's going to be a pro for 10 to 12 years. You can check that box for the future.
Yeah, they'll compete.
Oh, yeah.
And as we've seen before, Cardinals have always, or even before he arrived here with the Cardinals, but Shipley has always had to battle to, one, be on the roster, and then, two, be a starter. They're always looking to replace him.
Yeah, and I thought it was a nice gesture giving him the extension, considering he had worked hard. And, he may not look the part, but he's a blue-collar type guy. Yeah, he may have T-Rex arms where he doesn't have long arms, but for the most part, he's not going to back down from the Fletcher Coxes and the Geno Atkins and Aaron Donalds. He's going to try to go in there and hold his ground.
It's not a bad thing to have depth either on that this year. Switching over to Twitter, I know you mentioned, we kind of talked about the offensive line and where there may be areas that they target in free agency. What are some just overall positions you see being targeted in free agency this year?
Well, if we look at what the Cardinals have done on the defensive side of the ball, going out in making a couple claims, but you look at Robert Alford and Brooks Reed right now would be a backup and play on teams. So I got to think, and I think Steve Keim mentioned this morning on Doug and Wolf, that offense. Obviously, the offensive line is the most important thing. They got to get some wideouts. You look at the tight end position. Gresham's cap number's high. He should be fully healthy. I think Ricky Seals-Jones right now is probably the third-string tight end. John Phillips is a blocking tight end and plays on teams. So I think offensively, and it wouldn't surprise me, not so much in the draft, added running back to rookie minicamp, but I would say wide receiver, tight end, but you have to start with the offensive line.
And the interior of the defensive line, especially if you happen to lose Rodney Gunter, and inside linebacker, could be something that the Cardinals look at as well.
Last question here for you. We'll see how you guys keep it together now. And this is planted from David Johnson's burner account, Cardinals_31. If the Cardinals did take a corner first overall, which corner would you choose? And they said, I asked this question with no intent to stir things up between Mike and Craig.
Well, one, they're not going to take a cornerback #1 overall. That wasn't our debate. It's if the Cardinals traded down.
Or the first round. So you got a little wiggle room.
I said if they traded down, they could look at cornerback.
I think Greedy Williams, I mean, he's not the most physical guy, but we know a lot of cover corners. I mean, he's got long arms. I mean, he played in the SEC, so he went against good competition. I do think he could be a top 10 pick. I just don't see it here. That was civil.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, I think you could take one if you move down to 5. I think you could take top 5.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, I think 1 would be tough. But you took Patrick Peterson at 5, and every Sunday he trots out there and shuts down that team's best player.
One thing you fail to include, they're giving Robert Alford $7 million.
No, yeah, you wouldn't. Yeah, I think with the signing.
No,
now,
if you asked me 2 weeks ago, he's in play, but not now.
Best player available, regardless of position.
All right, put the card in right now. Nick Bosa.
That's not my choice. I'm not making that
pick.
They
haven't spoken to any.
To quote Vance Joseph, I'm not making that pick.
I'll put an asterisk next to regardless of position. Because, it's long snapper.
There's always
the guy's like the best
quarterback, punter, long snapper, the only 3 spots that are solidified with the Arizona Cardinals. Well, I don't think there's not a running back worthy of a top 10 pick.
No, I think the first running back off the board will be the Alabama running back. Hopefully he's healthy.
But you've seen teams get really good ones in the 3rd round. Alvin Kamara,
David
Johnson. So All right, that's all I have for you today. I'm really proud of you guys.
Nice try, Brandon.
To keep it together. I gotta plant these seeds and have a long weekend trying to build out the content.
That burner account, and I'm being facetious. I'm glad he made the point that he was not trying to get us to argue.
Surprised you didn't bring in boxing gloves. Maybe next week, Brandon.
I was actually looking for them, but I keep forgetting. So I'm sorry. Maybe next week.
Appreciate it always, Brandon.
Thank you, Brandon.
We have kind of you could use this as sparring gear.
No,
I don't think Ohms would like that.
Oh yeah,
we just got another question from King Harold V of Norway. He he asked if Jurecki and Grialou can do a show from Oslo. So he said he's going to start the Oslo Bird Gang.
Absolutely, why not?
If we get an all-expense trip, we're going.
We'll go anywhere here.
We'll skip the
Cards
combine.
Cover 2. No. After the combine.
Yes. We got free agency.
He said he'll throw in a tour of the fjords.
So
after minicamp.
You'd rather have
June
a trip
15th.
to the combine instead of Norway?
Yeah.
Oh,
Norway.
This is Mr. Combine over
there.
It's
not on my bucket list, but maybe down the road when I I can travel and have a little cache.
It's really nice there, by the way. I saw AC/DC there in 2009.
Wow.
It's expensive.
Well,
but
we
nice.
need to bring in King Omo then.
Yeah, he
because
could be our tour guy.
Yeah, he's got you covered.
Appreciate it, Brandon.
It's beautiful.
We'll do it again next week. Enjoy your long weekend.
Thank you.
We expect big things out of you next week.
Yeah,
I'll try my best.
Pressure's on.
Appreciate everyone's involvement here on this Wednesday edition of Cards Cover 2, and that's going to wrap up this edition and wrap up the week for us. Special thanks to Tim Delaney, King, Jim Omohundro, Devin Henry, Brandon Natus, for my partner Mike Jurecki. I'm Craig Grialou. As we leave you here on this Wednesday, we finish off staff picks with Cardinals broadcast coordinator and producer Grant Greeley's best shots of 2018. Enjoy.
Let's go, man! Let's go! Let's go, get it!
And a sliding catch as he breaks Jerry Rice's record for the most receptions with a single team in the history of the National Football League.